Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on capability maps, the next generation. I'm Milan Guenther. I'm one of the two presidents with Wolfgang Goebel of the Intersection Group. I'm based in Paris, but I'm originally from Düsseldorf, which is why playing Kraftwerk is a lot of pleasure to me. And today we are talking about capability maps. And just to tell you a little bit about who we are, so we call ourselves the Intersection Group. The name actually comes from my first book, Intersection, that came out in 2012 about enterprise design. And so we are a not-for-profit association based in Vienna, and we are still on it on this idea of designing better enterprises. So our association is dedicated to helping people create better enterprises. And we know that is quite an ambitious task. So we put the galaxy behind our logo just to illustrate that, but it's also a little bit of a pun on one of the techniques we're using that I will mention a bit later. So first we are going to do this search for capability map on Google image search. And I prepared that for you here on the screen. So you look for capability map, and this is kind of what you see. And I just took kind of randomly one of the examples here that is like kind of draw my attention because it's the most colorful. It is this one. It's in Archimate, and like nothing against any of the authors or anything, but I just want to illustrate this to tell you a little bit about what we think is wrong with capability maps and why we think they haven't been adopted so widely as they should be according to their proponents. So first of all, this is kind of hard to look at, right? A lot of colors, a lot of repetitive shapes, always the same shape actually. And then you have here campaign management, financial management, performance management, service channel management, digital customer management. Basically, you ask yourself, are they doing anything else other than management? It is also not entirely clear what company that actually is, what they are doing. And so we think that a lot of the troubles with the capability maps today comes from a few of the doctrines that have been established and a lot of the usages that have been established in the past. And so this is why we call it the next generation. Just resuming my slides here. So what we see there is basically usually they are centered on IT. It's interesting that it has been modeled in Archimate because it's also a kind of IT-focused language. If you look for practical patterns how to actually design capability maps and how to get to good, well-designed capabilities, you do not find a lot. Many of them are actually ugly. As a trained graphic designer, it's not necessarily like it would be quite easy to make them a little bit more appealing by adhering to some of the very, very basic rules of typography and space and alignment and so on. So that's something that is not negligible because many people actually engage with maps and models as they see if they are like nice to the eye. And maybe the most important problem that we see is, despite their potential, that we also see it's a very big potential, they are not really widely used outside the enterprise and business architecture community. And so, no, someone says the screen is not working. I will restart the screen sharing. Entire screen. Okay, I hope it works now. So yeah, problems with capability maps here on the screen. And one of the most maybe difficult problems that we have in capabilities, that we see in capability maps, is the way capabilities are being named. And here you have one of the world's best tennis players from Austria, and he just did something, And if we go after these doctrines, we would have to say, okay, what is the business object or the information object that is really important here in this capability? And we take that object and then we add something. And so you see, like you saw, or maybe hopefully you saw on the example, a lot of capabilities are called something management, like product management, claim management, money management, customer management, contract management, and so on. And if we now did the same with this picture here, and we ask ourselves, okay, what does this person need to be capable of doing? We would say, okay, they have a racket and they have a ball. So is it tennis racket management, or is it tennis ball acceleration management? And this doctrine, or this philosophy of naming capabilities, comes from also like an IT-centered view. Has very much to do with the way you name database tables and some things like that. But what it leads to is basically this unnatural language that people have difficulty engaging with, which leads to capabilities as a concept, but also capability maps basically only used in IT. So people who understand why you would do that. And that then leads to a problem, which is a very weak alignment between people in the business, which is normally, from an IT perspective, everyone not in IT. And so one of the first things we find really important when it comes to capability naming is we use the term that people actually use to describe what's going on. So this player here is serving, so we call the thing serve. And we group capabilities instead of always focusing on one object, like trying at all costs to find a business object or an information object and base everything on that. We say, okay, there are different ways to find the highest cohesion between what's going on, different things that are going on, different things that are needed. And that then leads to common language that people can actually understand and relate to using their language. And we hope that with these like slight changes, but important changes, capabilities can be present everywhere. And that leads to a seamless co-design between IT, business, and other people involved in designing the enterprise. Now, if you are new to the concept of capabilities, this might be a little bit of a weird entry point, because you might not even have seen or heard about this kind of tool. But bear with me, because we are going to get into that. So here is a capability map that we think is a good example of what a next generation capability map should look like. And one question to you, like if you look at this capability map, and you can agree or disagree with me if it's beautiful or ugly, but do you have an idea what kind of company that is? What are they doing? And if you have an idea, just write it into the chat. Like what is this kind of company doing? Who are their customers? What kind of products and services do they have? Transportation, yes. Railway service provider, exactly. Do you see anything in particular that they are doing that others maybe don't do? Yeah, it's intersection railways, exactly. Yes. It could be Deutsche Bahn, yes. So you have a few clues in there, right? You have train operations, which means, yeah, okay, they operate trains. You have things like routing. You have infrastructure management, which means they also run their own infrastructure. So it's not a company like, for example, Eurostar, that does not actually own their own trucks and infrastructure. You have a few. You have things mentioned here, like freight terminals. So they actually also have B2B freight customers or freight services and so on. So we think one of the important traits of a well-designed capability map is you look at it and at kind of first glance you see what kind of company is that. And if you follow the before mentioned naming convention of calling everything something management and always trying to find an object, like I've seen capability maps where they have like customer management and agreement management and contract management and risk management and all of these things, and you kind of, it's kind of a glossary of MBA terms, but you don't really see what they are doing. And so that's one of the things that we think are really important. So yeah, we will dissect this map a little bit, why it looks the way it does and why things are grouped the way they are. And yeah, as some of you already know, this is the Intersection Railway company. It's a company that does not actually exist. It's a company that we are using, or that we have invented at Intersection Group, to come up with examples that are sufficiently complex that we can actually show the benefits of the kind of tools and ideas that we are developing, but also like an industry that most people are familiar with. So it's a company that might have had its origins in a small European country as a national public service provider, and then it got privatized and now is competing on a European market where a lot of other train companies are also competing, and it does offer passenger and freight services, and runs also infrastructure in that country. And here you see the original Trans-Europe Express that this alludes to a little bit, a European railway network. So when we talk about enterprises, it's a term with a lot of, I would say, different connotations, not all of them positive. People often think of complicated, expensive, difficult to deal with, like enterprise solutions, and also high security, high availability, high performance, and so on. And all of this is fine. But when we really dissect this term and we take it from its origins and its roots, it comes from French, from entreprendre, and it means to undertake, and something like an undertaking. And so here we see an enterprise, right? So we have a railway station here. This is actually a Wimmelbild. It's a German term for something like a messy picture. It's for kids to paint the figures. And you see here a lot going on, right? So you see the train, obviously, at the station. You see a lot of shops. You see people going about their business. You see actually a lot of different companies that are involved in this ecosystem, not just the railway provider. You see customer interaction points and so on. And so we think that at its very fundamental level, you can describe any enterprise with 4 elements, which are the outcomes that these people here are trying to achieve. Well, and of course, the people themselves, the activities they are undertaking in order to achieve those outcomes, and the things that they are using and interacting with in order to do so. And this is at the heart of the way we model capabilities. The goal for capability mapping and modeling in general is this, and it has been described quite well in Design for Digital, a book by Jeannie Ross and Martin Mocker. And there's a keynote in the Intersection Conference channel on that from Lisbon, if you're interested. But so they basically say that if we are co-designing capabilities, this also enables us to better design the structures that we need to have to establish an adaptive enterprise. And an adaptive enterprise is one that we can actually easily change. And this concept has a lot to do with agility, right? So, but for some reason, agility as a term has been more connotated with developing a lot of software quite quickly. And this is not what we mean, right? So what we mean is we want to achieve a componentization, a modular structure of the enterprise, so that when something changes, like in the market, in the compliance, when we want to launch new products and services, when we merge, when we do all sorts of things, we can actually easily change what we have. And that includes what people do and how we structure teams and how we establish our collaboration with other actors. But it also includes our assets, like buildings, finance, and also IT applications. And so when we talk about capabilities, there are lots of other concepts that come into the same realm that people, kind of try to equate with them and or also distinguish from them. So is it the same as an organizational unit? Is it actually an activity going on? Or is it the same as a business function? If you read like organization development and design literature, or also some MBA literature, we talk about business functions. Or is it maybe the same as processes? And all of them, like this confusion is basically illustrated by the sentence here where we say we have a billing team, and that billing team has the capability to do the billing, and it performs the billing processes and activities that then result in a bill. And you ask yourself, okay, what here is now a capability? What is a team? What is a process? What is a function? What is a unit? What is a team? And so on. And so in order to clarify this, we basically say, yeah, there are teams, there are organizational units, and they have a capability. So they can do something. That's already at the fundamental level an important thing to establish. And then in order to do something, they perform activities. So a capability, when it's actually being performed, becomes an activity or managed process. Now, why would you map capabilities as something separate from processes or organizational units? And there, the strength of the concept to say, what are we capable of doing, comes into play, because it provides you the single stable source to structure the business. So you are not concerned with how do we actually organize our teams. We are also not really concerned about in which sequence do we do things or who's doing what. But what we are looking at is basically what needs to be done. What do we need to be capable of doing, regardless of time, space, and so on. And so this is the goal of capability modeling, so that we get to this modular structure, and we can then inform all those other structures using this single stable source, so that they are also in alignment and not, as we usually see, different hierarchies and different structures. So if we want now to define what a capability is, we have a definition here in Edgy. Edgy is a product that we are going to release in March. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. But so the definition that we have is what we are able to do by orchestrating our people and assets. And so that means we have this boundary that we say, okay, we are able to do something. And in order to be able to do this something, we need people, we need buildings, we need software, we need certain information and knowledge, we need maybe some machines, we need maybe some raw material, and all that together provides an output. And that output ultimately should be a product, which is something that we do for someone outside our own staff and our own partners, right? It should be ideally a customer or maybe an investor, like some stakeholder that wants something from us. But it can also be an intermediate output that comes out of this running this capability. So an example here is we have the capability billing, and for that we need someone who is the billing officer. We have an application that's called SAP FI. We have an office where these people sit in. We have a computer that they are using it. We are still in the intersection railways example, so we have to know the traveled route so that we can actually invoice another train company for using our infrastructure. And we need also something much more mundane and fundamental, which is we need to have electricity to actually do all of these other things and run them and print the bill and send it or email it or submit it via EDI or something. And so one important point when we talk about all the stuff that is here, what is actually the capability? And there, very importantly, you see it's a round object. In Edgy, round objects mean outcomes. So we see capability as the outcome of having everything ready. Like we have all the stuff we need, we have all the people we need, we have all the skills we need, and we have all the resources we need in order to produce this bill and to do the activity billing. But it's the outcome of being ready, having everything in place. And this is already one point of contention with some other bodies of knowledge, where they say, okay, maybe it's an object, maybe it's an asset, maybe it's a thing, maybe it's a structure, maybe, so we think, okay, the capability it means we are in a state where we can do something. So that being established, what is a capability? How do we then get to groupings and to that single structure that then can inform structuring everything else, so that we can decide what goes together and what should be apart? And how do we see if any of these groupings are actually good? So there we come to a very important concept that for capability mapping that the engineers and architects in the room will be familiar with, but that we think needs to be adopted by basically everyone co-designing any kind of structure in and around an enterprise, which is loose coupling. In order to be adaptive, what we want is some kind of element, some kind of boundary, where we say inside that boundary, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of dependencies. So we have a lot of people talking to each other, a lot of people interacting with each other. So if we put them into separate buildings, for example, that means they are on the phone all the time because they have to talk to each other all the time. If there are lots of different, if they have a lot of interactions, maybe that also means that they use the same software tools, they use the same applications. Because if we put different roles, we give different roles different applications, then we need to integrate them and we need to have bridges, or someone needs to do a lot of copy paste and so on. Yeah, maybe they use the same assets, they use the same machines, they talk about the same resources, they work on the same products and so on. So the more what we do, what's going on is dependent, the more we want to group it inside one capability. And then on the other side, outside those capabilities, we want to strive for the exact opposite. We want to strive for the least possible interaction and dependency, so that in the end we get modules, and that's basically what we use capabilities for. We get modules of pieces of enterprise, you could say, that in itself are very tightly coupled and need to be well designed, optimized, and so on. But then in the interaction with the rest, we have very clear responsibilities and roles. We know what's going in, we know what's coming out, and we can say, okay, this capability depends on that one, but that dependency then is very clear, very well defined, and it's actually quite simple. And there's not like a huge web of different dependencies and so on going on, as you see in this illustration. And so this comes back to the definition and the principle of cohesion. So the degree to which the elements inside this capability belong together for some unifying purpose. And so between those separate elements here, those separate capabilities, we strive for independence and modularity, while inside we strive for cohesion. So how do we find principles for grouping things together? When are groupings actually good? And so here you have a park with a lot of flowers. So now we can try to group these flowers, but it's quite tough, because some are big, some are small, some have the same color, some are on the ground, some are in the air, some have the same species or similar species based on the taxonomy. And so we have to find criteria, or ideally one criterion, to say, okay, all this stuff goes together and all that stuff is separate. And in an enterprise context, this is not easy, because depending on the context, depending on the nature of the capability, you might have different criteria how you want to group these things together, so that then actually you get to the benefits of having modularity and being able to change and reuse capabilities. So on the top level, we find some like universal patterns that work for most enterprises, not all of them, but a lot of enterprises. You can use them because in the end, most enterprises address some kind of a customer. So you could say there's a top level of capabilities. How do we actually get in touch with the customer? How do we sell via channels? How do we run our customer services? How do we provide information to customers and so on? Then we have to do something. We need to run something. So most enterprises have some kind of operations that then create the products. Products here in an inclusive way. So we also mean things like services. So manufacturing, if we like make physical stuff, or warehousing so that we can actually store it, logistics to move it, processing orders and so on. All of these are operations that we need to have in place in order to create those products. And then you have capabilities that are basically, you could say, vertical to that, or that support all of these other capabilities. So these are business components that are reusable in many of the others. So many of the others depend on these support capabilities in order to run smoothly and in order to do their job. So for example, we need HR in order to actually get people, to train them, to onboard them, to pay them, and so on. And that's something that all these people then are needed for everything else that's going on. We might have marketing capabilities, customer management capabilities, accounting capabilities, IT capabilities, and so on. And then an enterprise is not static, it evolves. So we also need capabilities that help us to change the enterprise and to innovate and to actually benefit also from the modularity of the structure and say, you know what, we should actually move this there, or we should change this here. So there we have things like designing new products, coming up with our strategy and our vision, and also what we talk about here, the design of the enterprise is actually a change capability. And so how do we get to a capability map using these principles? So usually we have a lot of existing knowledge, especially if it's not a startup, but like an existing enterprise. And capabilities can be hiding in different existing models. So the organization chart usually, reveals some of the capabilities that the enterprise has. It's not the same. We will get into that later, but you can infer capabilities and find spot capabilities on that chart. You also have the products that come out of the enterprise, any kind of process documentation. And then with that in mind, you go in and you make a first draft of a capability model. And then usually you go into these iterative discussions and workshops with people, showing them that model, and they will say, no, not at all. That's not what it is. And so what kind of people do you want to talk to in order to get your capability map accepted and also accurate? People that really understand the business. It's normally people that have been around for a while, people that are experts in the domain or in the industry. So railway experts, for example, that can say, well, yeah, here we have building management for our stations and so on. But we also have a power plant, for example, that is also a building, but it's so different that they actually need to be separate. It's very, very different to build a power plant from building any other building and maintaining and managing that. And you can basically, as a capability mapper, as an enterprise designer, only say, yeah, okay, yeah, thank you very much. And then you show it to someone else, like, for example, people that run applications. With applications, we mean IT systems, information systems, because they usually have a lot of knowledge about the operations and about the way things are actually being run. More so usually than management designing organizational units or HR involved in the organization design. Because in the end, companies and enterprises today are basically a mix of people, some physical things going on, but also a lot of information being passed around. And so if you look at the way information is actually stored, captured, exchanged, and so on, how different applications are integrated, what kind of information is stored, what kind of information people need to do their jobs, basically you get an impression how the business actually operates, as opposed to, I don't know, a strategy document that says this and this and this is what we do. It's normally too abstract. But then we also talk, or you would also talk to executives, especially B-level. So what we mean by that is directors or vice presidents or senior vice president, whatever you have in your organization. Or in your client organization, and ultimately also executives, so the board, the C-level. Because in the end, what you want is that the leaders, the experts, and the people that understand the operations, people that understand the technology involved, the information going around, and basically also anyone else looks at this map and says, yeah, that's us. And I'm involved in this and this and this. And it doesn't seem like anything really, really big is missing. And it also doesn't seem like anything is really wrong. And also there are not many terms that I don't understand, ideally none. That said, it is usually not, it's not like there's no ideal capability map. You will not get to the perfect one. But it can be good enough for a lot of tasks, and the ultimate goal is, if it's being adopted, you have a successful base to do design. And so we talked a lot about people, and we talked a lot about things like cohesion and so on. But all inside those capabilities, you have basically this notion of an asset. And assets are, for most enterprises, incredibly important, and they tend to be ignored by, for example, classic organization and team design and development approaches. And just a railway example here. So here you have a construction site for a section of railroad. You see it's actually not usable right now for trains because there are like lots of things in the way. And when we talk about assets, what we mean is physical assets, like all those machines being used there, the buildings, like the station and so on, and little bridges and infrastructure elements, the raw materials that is actually needed, like the gravel, for example, to build actually the trucks, and then all that information that is being needed in order to manage this. Where are we? What is being done today? Who's doing what? What needs to be done before something else can be done? When can the trains run here again? How fast can they go? And so on and so on. And for that, usually we use software to manage that. So there we have applications like, for example, resource management applications, and we have technology that this is running on. And there is, because of the IT legacy of capability mapping, some kind of a bias that we tend to look a lot at the applications and the software, and we do not look so much at the other assets or at the people. While in the other department, on the other side of the fence, in the HR department, we look only at people and their skills and their job roles, but we do not really look at the applications they are using or at the machines and other assets that they need to do their job. And just one example here for a capability where this is actually the most important thing. So here we have a machine that is flattening tracks. It is very important when you're on a high-speed train for the train not to shake like madly, that the track is regularly flattened. And so it's done by a highly skilled team using a very, very specialized train device here. And so this gentleman here is very, very skilled in using that machine. So we have the flattening machine team operating a flattening train using special sensor software to actually find any kind of like bump. And we also have the gravel that the train is on. And so this asset, which is the machine in this case, drives the boundary of the capability. We can basically take the asset and say, what is all needed around this asset, like specialized skills, specialized roles, and so on, that then distinguish this from anything else around it, like that is not directly related. And then we can say, okay, that is maybe another capability. So we have a construction capability or a maintenance capability next to it, and this one is bounded by this asset. And that is maybe one module, one capability inside this build and maintain tracks. And that means that once we know that in this case it's the asset, it's the machine, we can say, okay, there's a team around it, there's a software around it, there's information around it, there's job roles around it, and so on and so on. So some intermediate takeaways. The goal of a capability mapping is to have one single decomposition of the business that we can then use to design a lot of things like teams and assets and so on. We start from existing documentation, but we are aware that this is not actually the capability map, because the existing documentation usually documents something else, like the organization, the teams, the processes, the products that we sell on our website and so on. We run a very broad elicitation process to find potential capabilities, and ideally the people that we engage with will take ownership of their own capability design. So someone in the track maintenance department will say, okay, yeah, this is how we do it, and just give it to me. I will come back to you tomorrow with how I see it actually, how it's being done. And so they own their part of the capability map, so that it really becomes a true co-design and not just a proposal, rejection, and iteration by a enterprise designer. We design for the highest cohesion between the capabilities. We look at with a lot of care at which categories we use and how we name them, and we make the capability map in with a goal to be easy on the eyes, nice to look at, easy to read, and beautiful. And so what that means is also that instead of the notion of alignment between people that design applications, operations, processes, and so on, like business analysts, business architects, enterprise architects, and then on the other side, people that design team structures, job roles, management hierarchies, and so on, which are normally managers together with HR and experts. Instead of aligning between those two activities that are running in silos, we want to have a fluid co-design between the technologists and the business experts and the management. So that said, if you are new to capabilities, you might ask yourself, well, but in the end, infrastructure management, yeah, we plan that, we do that, we run that, and then out of that comes a managed infrastructure. So isn't that just a business process? As we do the track infrastructure maintenance, for example, we could very well say, well, we start with the strategic planning, we budget the maintenance, we plan the track, we build the track, and then we maintain the track. So isn't it just, aren't capabilities and processes the same? And in Edgy, we say, well, processes are a set of related activities that our enterprise carries out. And what we're looking there basically is over time, what is the sequence and what is the dependencies between these steps. And this is something that by design and by intentionally, we do not look at as we design capabilities. Instead, there we look at what is the cohesion criteria and what belongs together, and we kind of ignore the time dimension. And that gives you a lot of, well, that reduces the complexity tremendously, because you don't have to look at sequences and steps, but you look really at everything basically on a flat table, and you try to make piles of things that fit together, and only then you can try to look at okay, now as we operate, how do we run through these different capabilities? And you can kind of compare it to a brain scan. So as you, I don't know, see a flower, different parts of your brain light up, and the same way, if an enterprise operates, different areas on the capability map light up, but we make a picture of the structure of the brain, not of the sequence of these activities. And the relation is also, yes, of course, we are talking about the same thing. Processes and activities are capabilities that are actually being performed, and the outcome that a process seeks to achieve is the outcome of the capability. Is a capability map just the same as the org chart? And it's a confusion that we get a lot, especially from people that are not so familiar with capability mapping, because it looks very similar, right? It's a hierarchical representation of who's doing what. The difference usually is that the organization chart tries to model, first of all, who is doing what, and also who is managing whom. So here you have an organization chart also for intersection railway. You see, so there's an infrastructure department, there's an operations department, there are shared services, and then you have, for example, routing per region, you have station operations per station, and so on. And so the truth is that you can infer, as I said before, a lot of capabilities from the org chart, but the capability map by design and intentionally does not look at who's doing what. And for example, how do we translate this needs to be done, like a capability that needs to be done into teams per region, for example, or per time phase of a project or something like that. But we will get to that a little bit, how all these things fit together, because we are looking now at the enterprise design facet model and everything. Like you've seen that our capability map is blue. That's because we are here talking about the blue enterprise design facet, which is called the architecture. And it tries to answer this question: how are we operating and what are we capable of achieving? And so a capability map basically is this representation of what we are capable of achieving. The process map shows rather how we are operating, and the assets show us what's needed for that. As we go into the organization design, we shift our question to how do we actually work together as a team now that we know that what's being done or what needs to be done, who's doing what, and how do we do that? How do we collaborate? How do we want to manage this hierarchical or as a network or as a matrix, or there's so many options, and all of that is kind of not shown on the capability map because, again, we want to reduce complexity. And that then intersects also with the identity. Why are we actually doing what we are doing, which is driving the team purpose and so on. So the organization is this intersection between these two facets, where we have to balance between the architecture, what needs to be done, what needs to be operationally implemented, and what drives our teamwork, drives our organization. Where do we want to go together? What matters to us? And so so Edgy basically is a language that includes a set of elements and relations. And here you see a representation of those same facets as before, but with the elements. So we have our capability here that requires certain assets that then is executed in processes, and it is owned, like organizations have this capability, and out of this comes a product that then appears in people's lives, serves certain tasks of customers or other people that interact with the enterprise via a journey using a certain channel, which then again reflects our identity, why we do all of this in the first place, and our brand. I will not go into the details of these elements now, but just to show you how capability maps inform the design of an org chart or of an organization. So here we have, for example, the railway infrastructure management, level 1, level 2, resource management, and in there we have the crew. So the crew is a resource that we need to manage, and then we have to decide, like, how does this capability appear in the organization? It might appear, of course, here in the resource management department, and then in the different regions. So we have the capability, the crew management instantiated here, but we also might need the same capability in the train operations when we manage our train personnel. And then, we have to discuss, is this the same or is this a different capability? And then with that, we can say who's doing what. Like, for example, the train restaurant, we might want an external partner doing that, or the furnishing of the night trains that we are running. Then certain things we want to have multiple times per region, like the night services, the train driver team, the logistics team. Then we might want certain things per station, like the cleaning team, the shunting team, because the station is basically the boundary where this capability needs to appear. Then we have certain departments, like maybe we have a centralized sales department, a scheduling department, energy supply department, because these teams are kind of congruent with the capability map, so they can exist only once and do it for the entire enterprise. Some teams want to maybe take responsibility for many capabilities, like the finance department might appear multiple times wherever this finance skill and finance domain appears, and so on. So we can, for each of the capabilities, say, okay, how do we actually translate that into an organization? And you see that the organization design and the capability are not 100% the same, but because of the higher level of abstraction, the capability map can inform the organization design. The same basically goes for products and services. So if we look at our product portfolio, we might have passenger transportation, and then maybe have night trains, high-speed trains, local trains. We have another hierarchy for freight or railway. And then if we look at our capability map, we can see that these products are actually represented, right? So we have here in the customer interaction, of course, we have ticket sales. Tickets are products. We have the passenger information. We have the restaurant. We have our night and conciergerie services. And of course, we have in the operations the trains themselves and the night train. So we can see the products on the capability map. There's a relationship. And then we have capabilities that are further away from the product, but they are important to deliver them, like, for example, the crew. We can also look at the capability map and say, are there potential products, like we have here, for example, a capability trade energy? That means there is a product energy that we sell to other companies or other railway providers, for example. Or we might say, here, we are very good at route planning. Should we actually offer that as a service to other companies that go through our country, or that don't have this same route planning capability? So we can also look at our capabilities and get ideas, like it's a representation of what we can do, or also what we should be able to do if we do a 2B mapping. And then we can from there look at what is actually products, what products could we actually deliver. And so normally product design is done the other way around, right? So we look, for example, here as a customer journey and tasks that are interact. The customer interacts using different channels, and for example, does ticket booking. It's yellow here because we say it's a top task. So really important tasks: getting on the train, going to the station, having a snack, and so on. And then we say, based on that, where do we want to play? What kind of products and services do we offer? Like, for example, a route planner, or we say, no, actually Google should do that, so we don't play there. And onboard services, or maybe we want to add a local guide. And then again, we can look at our capabilities and say, do we actually, in order to deliver these things, can we do all of these things? Can we outsource them? Do we maybe have to include a new customer support or local transport coordination capability here in order to really well serve, or create these products in order to really well serve the tasks across the customer journey? And then also, who's doing what? And so here you see how edgy, if you use more of the elements, so you use capabilities, organization, product, task, channel, and journey, can be used to model a service blueprint. So this is a service blueprint, a very classic one, as it is described in this excellent book by Andy Pullein and his co-authors, called Service Design. And so using these, like, we have the products, we have our assets. So for example, here, as I said before, the power plants, for example, we want to differentiate our capabilities by assets, stations, tracks, power lines, all of these things. Like, the asset is so different that we say this is the boundary. And in other areas, we could say it's actually the activity that is really different. So the skills required, the roles, and so on. And with that, we get to the complete capability map. We have some capabilities organized by products, some organized by assets, some organized by activities. And usually it's a mix. It's a mix. So you never have like only one principle. But this is exactly the kind of discussion that needs to happen, so that then afterwards we can take this one universal decomposition of our business and say, okay, what does that now mean for the IT applications? What does it mean for the data? What does it mean for the processes? What does it mean for the organization? What does it mean for the products? And so on. There are some other ways to categorize capabilities, like management core support. You find in the literature a lot of different paradigms. Ours is not the only one. And it's good to look with an open eye at different kind of paradigms to differentiate capabilities. And this can also be combined with the way that we laid out here. And just to give you one more inspiration and another look at the same thing. So this is called a Milky Way map, where you basically lay out your capabilities on a cycle, on a business cycle, and you can put it in the context of a customer journey and of your purposes as an enterprise. And so basically look at the capabilities as a scenario as you operate. What is happening first, what is happening later, and does everything fit together? And if you're interested in the slides that you will get, you have on the slide the recording of that webinar by Wolfgang and Annika. And so just to conclude, sound categories, products should be visible. Have that discussion, group around what offers the highest cohesion. Is it the process? Is it an object, an asset? Is it a skill? Limit redundancy. So that's one of the most important goals. Like we want to have one capability only once, even if we need it across different regions, different or multiple times in the organization. We want to embrace specialization rather than say like something that is usually often called silos, sometimes is actually much needed specialization. But we also want to promote reuse. So if you have a specific skill, it can be reused across the organization. Use the language of the people that are supposed to read the map, not the language that some doctrine says you should use. And don't map too much. Usually it's good to have about 5 on the level 1, 10 to 20 level 2, up to maybe 70 level 3, but then you can basically stop mapping because you don't want to go beyond that level of granularity because then the map becomes unmanageable and is not useful anymore, because in the end it's an enterprise map, so it's supposed to help people design on the big picture rather than designing the details. That's it. We have, I think, time for a little bit of questions. So just to say again, if you are interested in this kind of stuff, we are Intersection Group. We are a not-for-profit association. We are designing and building right now Edgy. What you have seen today is part of Edgy. It's a language for enterprise design. Capabilities is one of the important elements there. We are running community and we are building a community and running events. And we are working on applications. So if you're interested in Edgy, please note down March 29. There will be a launch event as we unveil our open source product, which includes capability mapping. There's also next week a webinar by Wolfgang on what we recommend to make your enterprise architecture practice work better. And in September, we have our annual Intersection conference in Vienna. Please consider joining us there. The call for participation, if you want to present something, opens soon. This is our enterprise design pattern book, where we describe some of the things that I talked about today, how to do them in practice, basically giving you recipes how to engage your enterprise and go through these things. And that's it. And I will open the Q&A mode. Here we go. And so showing the question list. Okay, it basically says no one asked a question. So if anyone has a burning question on the content, please write them now into the chat window and we will discuss them. See, it's actually more of a discussion going on. So one question by Joao is the capability the outcome, or does it deliver the product as an outcome? In Edgy, we actually define the capability itself as an outcome. And the reason why is basically the capability describes what are you capable of doing, right? What can you do as an enterprise? And if you think of what you can do in your personal life, like maybe you can play tennis, as we have seen in the beginning. Maybe you can surf. What do you need for that? You need a racket, you need a ball, you need a tennis court. If it's a game, you also need someone you play with. You need time, you need some food before, maybe you need some water, so you need light. So all of these things need to be there in order for you to be capable of playing tennis. Does that mean you play tennis all the time? No, you just are capable of. So what we capture in the capability map is the outcome of having everything ready to play tennis or to whatever the capability says. So the other two concepts in the architecture facet, the other two elements, are complementary with that, right? So everything I said before, you could actually model as an asset that is needed to have that capability. And then the serving process itself, where you throw the ball and you actually smack it with your racket, you could model that as a process. But what the capability captures is the outcome of having everything in place to do that. That makes sense. Thomas is asking, have we seen experience where organizations are reorganizing themselves according to the capabilities? Yes, we have seen that. It's like my background is not the like IT engineering. It's rather coming from a design background, and I actually have been involved in a lot of organization design or projects that have been framed as organization design or ways of working. And a lot of times the paradigms basically say you focus on things like how do we meet, how do we incentivize, how do we want to collaborate, how do we want to take decisions, do we want to use Slack or like all these kind of things, that how we work together. Usually it's not necessarily in scope what we actually do. So the org chart, if there is one, is usually designed by management and middle management without adhering to any of these principles that we just laid out today. So introducing a capability map or a capability mapping activity as part of the organization design process is like I've seen it work really, really well, because you basically say, no, we don't yet look into teams, we don't look into roles. What we look at is very, very strictly what needs to be done, and only when we established a good representation of what needs to be done, we take those other decisions. And the more you evolve the map, the more people also outside the traditional users of capabilities will be open to discuss this. That's my experience. That said, in the beginning, we said it's not widely used outside the architecture, business and enterprise architecture communities, and that is still true. But we think it is because of the way it is currently being used and presented as more as a technical engineering kind of exercise rather than a co-designed representation of what needs to be done, and that what people and something that people can actually relate to. So, Frederic, just reading your question. So, we are actually talking to some members of the Open Group Architecture Forum, and there will be a mapping between Edgy and Archimate. And there are also several EA tool vendors working on implementation. That said, a lot of times Edgy is being used in much simpler tools, like for example, we use it in Draw.io, in Google Slides or PowerPoint, in the like, yeah. So it's not necessarily requiring this kind of tooling to do something with the language, but you can if there is a tool that you already use and if you want to integrate it with knowledge that is already stored in there. Okay. And then Thomas. Yeah, so the question is, how do you work with capabilities that underpin almost everything, right? So one example sometimes that we see is something like if an organization is or an enterprise is pursuing like a pattern, like a big data collection, so maybe they work on something like a data lake or huge data warehousing capabilities, and they basically say, whatever we do, we want some data to drop into that lake. And so basically this capability or this technical asset actually is everywhere. So how do we map that? And we see a lot of confusion between the technical asset, so something like, for example, a data warehouse, data lake, or whatever you have there, and what you actually use it for. And one solution that we have used in the past is really like just clarify what this thing is used for. So is it strategic decision making? Is it feeding an AI innovation project? What is it? And name that, because also the majority of the enterprise, of course, will not know what this thing is supposed to do. And then very clearly separate out the technology, the application from those uses, from those capabilities. And if you have a capability that is basically has a dependency with every other capability, that's fine. They might be stronger or weaker because there might be activities where it's more important to collect the data in this example than others. But yeah, so that's like you map it. You don't put it everywhere. You map it as a separate box, and then there can be an activity or an exercise, and this is also something that the Milky Way is really good for, to see across a scenario, like where is this capability actually being triggered? Is it really everywhere, and where is it really important? Yeah, the hierarchical map might not be able to answer that because it usually ignores what, like the dependencies. Like if you draw them, you get just a lot of arrows. So I'm scanning for some more questions. You will get the slides and the recordings. Okay. Last question before we run out of time. Does it make sense to have a set of capabilities to manage and govern data as an enterprise asset? Well, it depends. I tend to say yes, because data nowadays is seen as something technical, but it actually isn't, right? So if you think of any kind of enterprise, there has always been data. It has been in books. It has been in I don't know, lists, in drawers, in folders, like in physical things, and then computers came along, but that doesn't really change the data. Like a very classic library in the 1800s had a metadata control for all the books. And so I would say labeling data as something technical is already wrong. So managing data for the business is vital for any business. So yes, it makes sense to capture that as a capability. Would you like how technical would you model that, right? So, and this is where it gets sometimes a bit difficult to differentiate between like at what level are we still talking about a capability that our enterprise needs to do, and at what where is the transition to, for example, a feature or a function of a technical asset that is needed for this capability. Especially activities like cleaning up the data and so on that are usually like have some specialized tools and so on. And there, well, my answer is it very clearly it depends. It depends a lot about on the context. If it's a technically savvy organization where people can actually understand these words and relate to them, I would say you can go a little bit further, still maintaining the separation between technical asset and capability, and not falling for the temptation to include something like a differentiation between business and technical capabilities. We have seen that is a bit of a difficult path to then yeah, to then bring them together again once you do that. In more classic environments, I would say keep it out as much as possible, because again, the goal of the map is that people use it to take all the decisions that need to be taken, and not to represent, for example, technical decisions, how you want to implement any kind of data management capability. All right, that's it for today. You have on the screen here the links to our website, to the different books, to our conference. You also have a link to the starter kit if you want to get started with enterprise design, to the recordings of the conference videos. We are soon to publish the Intersection 22 from Stockholm talks. You can also look at the archive of the webinars, including the Milky Way, the Edgy language, and so on. And if you want to continue the discussion, please consider joining our community on Slack. So you have a link there, x-g.at/Slack, and would be happy to see you there or next week in Wolfgang's webinar. Thank you so much for watching.